What's happening? A great Thursday to all of you. Thanks for joining me. As always, it is very much appreciated. Later on, we'll get to a Celtics-Pacers game to preview. But first, before we get to the Patriots, a little bit of a note here. Next week, no podcasts Monday and Tuesday. Going to take that extended holiday weekend. So no podcasts Monday and Tuesday. We're back next Wednesday, live at 11 a.m. right here on YouTube. Of course, you can catch us on Spotify, Apple Pods, and YouTube on demand. So no pods next Monday, next Tuesday, back on Wednesday. It is very unlikely that the Patriots will make any kind of big addition, so to speak, before mandatory minicamp. This team, as currently constituted, is the team as of right now. I don't think we should anticipate any big trades, any big signings, the Stephon Gilmores, the Justin Simmonses. I don't think we should expect that to happen before we get to mandatory minicamp. So what I want to do today is look at just the roster. I want to look at this roster, and I want to answer the question, did this team get better? My off-season slogan over the last several months has been Patriots, just get better. So today, there is no better time during the first week of OTAs to ask the question whether or not the Patriots have done that. Have they just gotten better over the last few months? My answer is yes. I believe this Patriots roster right now is better than the roster that was handed to Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo back in January. And we're going to break this down position by position, side of the football versus side of the football. Let's begin with defense. This defense was number 9 in DVOA last year. If you're wondering what DVOA actually is, you look at the strength of schedule, you look at expected points, all of those things, and you figure out what a team should do against that schedule and how they actually performed against the opposition they faced. The Patriots, 9th in DVOA last year, so a top 10 defense. They lost 2 legitimate contributors this offseason, right? They lost Mack Wilson. They lost Lawrence Guy. Now, they didn't really lose Lawrence Guy. They said goodbye to Lawrence Guy. They lost Mack Wilson in free agency. But you look at who they're gaining. They get back Matthew Judon from the biceps injury. They get Christian Gonzalez back from the labrum injury. They get Marcus Jones to return as well. And when you look at those returnees, let's first start with Judon. He is your number 1 pass rusher. He's your best edge, and he is arguably your best defensive player. You're getting him back. You're getting him back with a chip on the shoulder, motivated to prove to people that he deserves a long-term contract extension. If not an extension, then he deserves a big payday this offseason. So you get Judon back, your top pass rusher, one of your biggest impact players on this team. He returns. That's great. You also return your best cornerback in Christian Gonzalez. Some believe that Gonzalez, and I would be in this group of that some, we believe that Christian Gonzalez could end up being a top 10 corner this year. You get him back. You get the ability to shut down one side of the field defensively in that secondary. He is a travel cornerback. He is put me on an island type of guy. He proved what he could do the first 4.5 weeks last year. He is tremendous. He is only going to improve, and as long as he stays healthy, he is a stud cornerback. So you bring back a stud pass rusher, impact guy. All he does is make plays, Matthew Judon. You bring back Gonzalez, outside cornerback number 1, somebody who I believe will be a top 10 corner within the next year. You get those guys back. You also bring back Marcus Jones, who is really valuable when you think about his versatility. We talked about this a little yesterday. He can play in the slot. He can play back at safety. He has explosiveness that not a lot of guys in that secondary have. So Marcus Jones, I think if he stays healthy, it's a big if, but if he can stay healthy, Marcus Jones might surprise some people this year. So you lose or you let walk Mack Wilson, Lawrence Guy. You bring back Judon Gonzalez and Marcus Jones. How do you replace Lawrence Guy? You replace him with Armon Watts. 1-year deal from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Seems like Watts can at least do a pretty decent job of replacing Guy, especially where a guy was in his career. Watts is somebody who can give you a little bit more of a pass rush on the interior defensive line, has improved against the run. So I like the Watts move. And he is, I would say, for all intents and purposes, an equal to Lawrence Guy. So you did not lose a ton there. You replaced Mac Wilson with Sion Takitaki. Takitaki is not as much of a playmaker as Mac Wilson is, but he is a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. He's somebody who was very, very good in coverage, and I think he's going to be able to hold his water. Elliott Wolf scouted him back in Cleveland when they decided to draft him a few years ago. I think Takitaki can give you very steady play at linebacker in that Mac Wilson type role. So you don't lose much there. So just the injury returns to me make this defense better. Judon, Gonzalez, Marcus Jones coming back. Takitaki for Mac Wilson. Lawrence Guy replaced by Armon Watts. I would say that's pretty much a wash. You also have to look at the development of Keion White. What can he do? You're adding Marte Mapu as an element to this defense. You're hoping that Christian Barmore continues to build off of what he did the last 2 months of last season and becomes a top 5 interior defensive lineman in the league. So there's room for development. There's room for improvement. And you have some really important pieces coming back from injury. To me, the defense should be as good, if not better, than it was last year. Just because of Judon and Gonzalez. I'm talking about this roster, by the way. Again, I'm talking about the roster. I'm not talking about coaching. I'm not talking about the schedule. I'm talking about whether or not this roster is better right now than what it was back in January. Defensively, I think this roster is better than it was back in January. I'll give you my offensive thoughts in a moment, but first I remind you that this podcast is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. 9 maps, 30-plus acres of land. Hilltop Forts, they've got paintball, they've got airsoft, they've got paintball and airsoft, ages starting at 6 plus. They take care of you. Telling you right now, just show up with some good shoes, jeans, long sleeve shirt. Their top-notch staff will take care of you, low-key, casual. They're great at what they do. If you're interested in paintball and or airsoft, check them out. They're in North Kingston, Rhode Island. You can give them a call, 401-228-6366. That's 401-228-6366. Warzone, Paintball, and Airsoft, they support this program. If you're interested in having some fun, support them. And when you get there or you call them, let them know the Nick Cattle Show sent you. All right, offensively. Offensively is where it gets really interesting. Excuse me, getting choked up about this. Offensively, you look at massive turnover from 2023. I mean, this offense is so different than what it was last year. We're talking, scheme-wise and coach-wise, but also roster-wise, talent-wise. A lot of guys are different in separate rooms over there at Gillette Stadium right now. So offensively, you have a massive turnover. The quarterback room, we always start with the quarterback. The quarterback room is better. If you don't take Jacoby Brissett and Drake May over Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi from last year, I frankly don't know what you're doing. The quarterback room is absolutely surefire, no doubt, not even debatable, better this year than it was last year. Then we get to the wide receiver room. Let me remind you, the wide receiver room from 2023. It might hurt you a little bit, but let me remind you what that room looked like. Your wide receiver 1 was Devontae Parker. Then you went into the season saying Juju, and maybe you thought Juju was the number 1 and Parker was the number 2. Maybe. But you had Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster at the top of your wide receiver depth chart going into last season. Kendrick Bourne would be your wide receiver 3. Then you had Tyquan Thornton as wide receiver 4, and you were crossing your fingers hoping that one of the rookies would actually be able to make an impact, whether that would be Pop Douglas or Kayshon Boutte. We know what happened. It was Pop. Compare that room last year to what the room looks like right now. Devontae Parker, let's say, versus KJ Osborne. I think Osborne, not telling you he's great, but I would say Osborne is an upgrade over Parker. Jalen Polk, versus Juju Smith-Schuster. The Juju we got last year, honestly, I believe Jalen Polk is going to be an upgrade over what we saw from Juju last year. Now, if Juju's more healthy, looks closer to the guy like he was with the Chiefs, we can have that conversation once we actually see it with our eyes. But when you compare what Juju looked like last year to what I expect from Polk this season, I would say Polk is an upgrade. Even if it's a slight upgrade, I would say he's an upgrade over Juju. Kendrick Bourne, hopefully he comes back and he looks like Kendrick Bourne. I think he'll be put on the PUP list. We'll see how all of that unfolds come week 5, week 6. But I really think that, you look at Bourne, you say, if he gets back, Bourne is Bourne. Pop Douglas is Pop Douglas. You could say Pop is going to improve from last year, right? He had that early year fumble against Miami. He was benched because of it, did not play a ton of snaps for a few weeks after that fumble. I would anticipate Pop Douglas being a better player this year than he was last year just because this is his second season. He made a pretty good impact last year in his rookie year. I think he'll be better in year number 2. So Pop year 2, I think will be better than Pop year 1. Then you get down to, Javon Baker and Juju Smith-Schuster as wide receiver 5. And I would say those guys, even with Juju being at 60% like he was last year, those guys are upgrades over Tyquan Thornton because Tyquan Thornton has done pretty much nothing in the NFL. And as much as Juju is a question with his health, so is Thornton. So when you look at this wide receiver room and you break it down receiver by receiver, this wide receiver room this year is better than it was last year. Again, don't mistake what I'm saying to, this wide receiver room is great. Don't fix your lips to create a narrative that I am not giving you, saying that there's a clear number 1 guy in that room. We talked about it yesterday. I don't think there's a bona fide number 1 wide receiver in that room, but there wasn't a bona fide wide receiver number 1 in that room last year. So receiver to receiver, when you compare these guys, this year's receiver room is better than last year's. I would absolutely take Osborne, Polk, Bourne, Douglas, and Baker over Parker, Smith-Schuster, Bourne, Thornton, and Douglas. Absolutely take this year's room over last year's room. How about tight end? I think the tight end room is better this year. Hunter Henry is Hunter Henry. Austin Hooper is going to give you more than Mike Gesicki because Mike Gesicki gave you almost nothing. I was very disappointed in Gesicki last year, how they used him, his lack of production. I thought he could have been an X factor for that offense, and he was almost a complete waste. I am very confident that you will get more from Hooper than you got from Gesicki last year. Hooper is an upgrade. Now, Pharaoh Brown, I'm going to say that Pharaoh Brown as tight end 3, starting last year, is better than Wilcox and Jaheim Bell. Now, we've got to see how Jaheim Bell develops. I actually did a segment on Jaheim Bell on last night's Patreon podcast for Patreon members. You can check out that page if you'd like. And I went into how Jaheim Bell could actually be a secret weapon for this offense this year. But for right now, I would have Brown over the Wilcox/Bell combo. But I still think that your tight end room is better because inevitably you're looking at the top 2. And Henry and Hooper is better than what you had last year from Henry and Gesicki. The running back room is interesting. I would call it equal. I would call it equal with room for more potential this year. Ramondre Stevenson is Ramondre Stevenson. However, something had to be nagging Stevenson last year. If you watched him through the first month and a half, he was not the same guy, right? Then all of a sudden, about midway through the year, he started looking like Ramondre Stevenson. I would expect Ramondre, as long as he's healthy, to look like the second half of 2023 Stevenson versus the first half of 23 Stevenson. But Stevenson is Stevenson, so let's call that a draw. The interesting part of this in the running back room is Ezekiel Elliott versus Antonio Gibson. Zeke was much better than I expected him to be last year. Props to him. I thought he was better on the field than anybody could have wished for. I thought off the field, he was a tremendous teammate. Zeke was one of my favorite players on this team last year. But Antonio Gibson, he's younger. He's more explosive. He gives you much more of a pass receiving element out of the backfield. And he's a really good fit for this AVP offense. So that's why I say, to me, the running back room is equal right now. But I do believe that the running back room this year has more potential than last year because Gibson gives you that more potential beyond what Zeke Elliott is and was. Offensive line is the most difficult evaluation for this offense. No doubt about it. So let's go player by player. Last year, you had Trent Brown at left tackle. You have Chuks Okorafor set to be your LT1 this year. I'm taking, quote-unquote, good Trent Brown over Okorafor. So I would lean Brown over Okorafor. Cole Strange versus Sidy Sow. I lean Sidy Sow. Even though Sow right now would be moving to left guard and he was a right guard, I still think Sidy Sow is the better player when you look at Cole Strange and his penchant to be injured in some of the up and down play. I'm more comfortable with Sidy Sow than I am with Cole Strange right now, which is just a scary thought given that you spent the first round pick on Cole Strange. But I would lean Sow, not heavily, but I would lean Sow. David Andrews is David Andrews. Nick Leverett versus Sow. Now we're comparing Sidy Sow's rookie year to Nick Leverett. That's why I would lean Leverett right now because he has the experience. He's a pure NFL guard. He's proven that he can play, at least at a good level. You didn't know what you were getting from Sidy Sow last year. I would say Sidy Sow was pretty average. So you might go slight lean with Leverett, or you could say it's pretty even between Leverett this year and Sidy Sow rookie season. Right tackle, I don't think it's even close. Right tackle, you had Calvin Anderson, Riley Reif, Ebola Jambalaya, and you finally settled on Mike Onwenu at right tackle. I would take full-time, fully trained right tackle Mike Onwenu versus Onwenu being thrown into that position last year after continuing to train at right guard. So I would lean, and it's a tough call, but I would lean towards this year's offensive line, even though I know there's a problem at left tackle, or could be a problem at left tackle, which I will address in a couple of minutes. I would still lean towards this offensive line versus last year's offensive line because A, I think they have more depth, B, they have more youth, and C, they have more potential. So I would lean towards this year's offensive line slightly over last year's. I don't think there's a huge difference when you look at how that offensive line was by the end of the year versus what the offensive line will look like right now on paper. And if you said it was a wash, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I would just slightly lean towards this year versus last year up front. So that's why I say the Patriots did get better. Don't pay attention to just the frustrations of not going out and landing that bona fide number one wide receiver. Don't get too dragged down about, not going out and drafting that stud left tackle. There were a lot of holes on this team. And in totality, when you look at it, we just broke all of it down. In totality, the 2024 Patriots roster is better than what it was at the end of 2023. I think you have more depth. I think you have more youth. I think you have more potential. And you have some big-time players defensively coming back that will no doubt impact games on a consistent basis. Your wide receiver room is better. Your tight end room is better. Your quarterback room is better. So, yes. The answer is yes. My slogan all offseason long has been Patriots, just get better. I believe the Patriots got better this offseason. Now, I would also say, I don't think that they're exponentially better. Again, slight lean on the offensive line. Pretty much a wash at running back. I think that they got better, but I would not expect them to win a ton of games this year, right? You can improve the roster, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win 9, 10 games and get into the playoffs. The fact is, we look at this roster and we feel like, at least I do, that this team is going to lose aplenty. They're going to lose a number of games this year. But we're just looking at the roster. We're not looking at the schedule. We're not looking at the coaching. We are looking at the roster. What the 53-man is going to likely look like when we get to week 1 of this season. And of course, we can't account for injuries. We have no idea how many injuries there will be. But looking at this roster, yes, I believe that they are better right now than they were when Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo took over. All right, before we get to left tackle, don't forget to give us that thumbs up, like the show, like this podcast on YouTube. That's how we get more eyeballs. We build the community. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Absolutely free to subscribe for this podcast. Check it out. If you like what we do, if you love what we do, don't forget to subscribe and also rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. All right, so let's say a core of 4, Caden Wallace and Vidarian Lowe, don't work out at left tackle. My question is, how does Elliott Wolf respond to that? And when does he deem it necessary to respond? There are lots of questions about left tackle. And I think all of those questions are 100% justifiable. I've said, I have my concerns. I have my concerns that a core of 4 is going to be able to swing over to the left side and be just fine. I have concerns about Caden Wallace swinging over to the left side and being just fine. And Vidarian Lowe, he was a turnstile an awful lot last year. So I have concerns about left tackle. I'm going to give this team time, and I'm going to give Scott Peters and Robert Kugler time to work with the O-line, actual offensive line coaching, which this team hasn't had a lot of over the past 3 years. I'm going to give them some time to see if they can make this work. But I am not walking into this blindly believing that this is going to be some great answer. So yes, left tackle is a question mark. Yes, I think you should have concerns about left tackle. But let's look at the options. Option 1, everything works out. They play great. I find that to be unlikely, but it's certainly an option. It's unlikely, but it's an option. Maybe they play great. Maybe a core of 4 makes the transition, no big deal. Maybe Wallace makes the transition, no big deal. At least one of those two guys effectively make that transition, and we're laughing about how we were questioning what this left tackle spot would look like back in May. I find it to be unlikely, but you've got to put it out there. Another option is they play good. They don't play great, but they play good. They give you average play. I think that's possible. I think it's possible that one of Wallace or a core 4 will transition well enough to make that spot good. Not great, but good. Average. There's also the possibility that they play below average. And honestly, going into this experiment, I anticipate that a core 4, Wallace and Lowe, will end up playing below average football. That's how I'm looking at left tackle. I don't think they'll be average. I don't think they'll be great. I think they'll be below average. That is my expectation for the left side at tackle. But I think you can survive all of those outcomes, right? You could certainly survive if they play great. Awesome news. Fantastic. No big deal. If they play average, I think you take it, right? If I told you that a core 4 or Wallace is going to give you average left tackle play in 2024, I think all of us would take that. And even if they play below average, I think you can survive that. We've talked about it. The rest of this offensive line should be pretty good as long as they're healthy. And if that's the case, you can survive left tackle being below average. What you can't survive is the 4th option, which is left tackle looks like the worst of Trent Brown or when Brown was out last year, and it becomes absolutely abominable. You're not going to be able to survive with abominable play from left tackle. You have to make sure you get at least below average play. So I wonder if we're waltzing towards mandatory minicamp And left tackle looks like it could be abominable. If you go through, mandatory minicamp, those couple of days in mid-June, and left tackle is a disaster, then what do? What does Elliott Wolf do? Do you break glass in case of an emergency and put Vidarian Lowe there? I think that's a yikes. Do you try to swing Owenu from the right side to the left side? I think that's very unlikely. You're already asking him to go from guard to tackle. He's full-time trying to transition to right tackle. Don't mess with his brain. Don't screw around. Don't put him on the left side. You've got one good tackle. Keep that good tackle where he is, where he's training, what he wants to do. Can you swing? Can you swing Calvin Anderson? I don't know, because I'm not sure what Calvin Anderson's status is going to be. Greg Bedard wrote that he looks really skinny right now. I mean, the guy went through malaria last year, almost died, then had a heart contusion and almost died. So I'm not going to sit here and take it for granted that he's going to be physically ready to go week one. So I don't know if Anderson is going to be an option. I hope he's going to be an option, but we have no idea. Not going to take it for granted. Can they make a trade for a left tackle if the situation does look abominable or horrific after mandatory minicamp? They could make a trade, but really, how many good options are out there? I mean, think about what the Patriots did last year, right? They made a trade. They made 2 trades for a couple of tackles. Those tackles were Vidarian Lowe and Tyrone Wheatley Jr. Neither guy showed much of anything last year. So that's probably the level of tackles you're looking at via trade. Maybe something else will pop up for you and you luck out, and due to that incredible fortune, you get an average tackle via trade. But when you look around the NFL, and we discussed this during draft time, tackle play throughout the league is not good, and it continues to decline. Teams are more likely going to hang on to anybody they deem at least okay on the offensive line. Not many teams are going to be in the business of shedding useful offensive tackles. So the trade route is very difficult, which leads you to veteran free agency. And it takes me to Matt Bowen from ESPN, because I saw this note over I believe it was over the weekend, and Matt Bowen went through free agency fits and which free agents fit the best with certain teams. This was at ESPN. It was an insider article, and Matt Bowen chose Donovan Smith for the Patriots. And here's what he wrote about Smith. Smith would provide good competition for the left tackle spot and, at worst, depth. He started for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl last year, posted a pass block win rate of 90.8% while allowing 6 sacks over 438 pass block reps. New England needs reliable blockers for rookie quarterback Drake May, and Smith no doubt would help. So Donovan Smith was brought up by Matt Bowen. An interesting name. Ian Rappaport reported this week that David Bakhtiari from Green Bay is quote-unquote on schedule, according to his doctors, to be ready for 2024. Now, Bakhtiari has been a health disaster the last few years. His knees, not great. He played 1 game last year. He played 11 games in 2022. He played 1 game in 2021. He played 12 in 2020. Now, if you look back at that track record and you want to be a betting person, you would say that every other year, Bakhtiari gives you at least 11 games. So maybe he's back on that train. Maybe 2024, he gives you 10 to 12 games and you take a shot. But I think that's a dangerous game with Bakhtiari. And don't forget, Bakhtiari also has a history with Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith. Wolf and Highsmith were in that front office when they drafted Bakhtiari in Green Bay. So they know an awful lot about him. Smith, meanwhile, he's 30 years old. He played 12 games last year, 13 in 2022, and 17 in 2021. He also played 15 games in 2020. I do think Donovan Smith is a good option given the circumstances. I would not be upset if the Patriots realized and acknowledged that, by mandatory minicamp, the left tackle could be a bigger issue than they were hoping it would be. Going out and signing a Donovan Smith on a 1-year make good deal, I think you could do a lot worse. You also have Charles Leno. You have DJ Humphries. So there are other names out there still in the left tackle market. Now, of course, that would make you question why those guys are still available. Offensive line play is not very good, as I just mentioned, and it's now late May, and these guys are still out there looking for jobs. So you have to have reasonable expectations. But if the spot does end up being horrific for the Patriots, there are names still out there that you could bring in as possible Band-Aids to address that issue. And as we talked about in prior podcasts, there are ways to help at least one offensive lineman. You can help them via scheme. You can help them with chip blocks. You can help them with running back help and pass protection. There are ways. There are ways to help that situation. So we'll see how it unfolds. I would say the timing is also crucial because you have to evaluate this situation. And what you don't want to do is take too long evaluating what you have at left tackle. And then all of a sudden, these guys that are still out there, they sign elsewhere and your options dry up. And now you're forced. To roll with somebody you might not be comfortable with. So timing is critical. You've got to make that evaluation. Peters and Kugler have to feel comfortable with one of these guys. If they're not, then I think you've got to make a move. You got to make a move quickly right around mid-June to get ready for training camp. And then you throw that older veteran in the mix along with a core four and Wallace and maybe even Lowe. And you hope that one of them gives you average play, if not slightly below average play. And the quarterback health is huge and development is huge. So you don't want to walk into this year with a horrific situation. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe. All of those things help this podcast out. Also, if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Pods, rate and review. Beantown Brandon jumps in with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Brandon. It means the world to me. That's how we continue to survive here with this show. If you're wondering, YouTube, you get views. They take a little bit of a cut, right? So the YouTube views help out. The super chats help out. The super thanks help out. All of those things help us survive and continue to do this podcast. So I appreciate you, Brandon, sending the $20 super chat. If you have a question, don't hesitate to throw a question at me because that's a very, very nice super chat that you sent. I appreciate you, my man. I appreciate all the support from the people who invest their time in this content. Makes me keep going. Thank you. All right, so there's your Patriots thoughts for the day. Let's give you a quick preview of Celtics-Pacers Game 2. I got some thoughts. But before I get to Game 2, can we just say that Jaylen Brown deserved to be on an All-NBA team? He 100% deserved to be on an All-NBA team. Best record in the NBA, and I thought this was Brown's best season as a Celtic. When you look at overall, I know his scoring was down, but you could expect that with Porzingis and Holiday joining the team and also the improvement of Derek White on that end of the floor. Jaylen shot better this year. I thought that his defense was as good as it's ever been consistently throughout the season. Jaylen Brown deserved to be on an All-NBA team. He got hosed. He got absolutely hosed. Let's jump to Game 2, though. Tonight, first question, can the Celtics shoot better? They shot 33% from three. I would expect them to shoot better than that. Even though Indiana, we talked about this, they're good at limiting three-point attempts. They're good at limiting three-point makes. Thought the Celtics had some good looks that they missed on Tuesday night. If they shoot better than 33% from three, that's going to be an issue for Indiana. Because as we saw, that game was super tight on Tuesday night, and that was with the Celtics shooting 33%. So I would expect the Celtics to shoot better from three tonight. If not, we're talking nip and tuck again. Now, why do you shoot better from three? One of the things is paint touches. Touch the paint. I want to see a few more post-ups tonight, especially against the smaller guards and wings of Indiana. And I want to see more drive and kick game from Brown and Tatum. If the Celtics can consistently touch the paint tonight and spray that ball out, they will get great looks. And this team is too good shooting the three ball to get great looks and shoot worse than 35%. So touch the paint. It's the difference between taking threes, which is settling, and creating threes, which is what I just talked about. I wonder if Joe Mazzulla will go small against Miles Turner tonight. The Luke Kornet experiment did not work great, especially in the first half Tuesday night against Turner. Does Mazzulla do something different? Now, I've been tweeting, going back to the Cleveland series, I wouldn't hate some small ball. I wouldn't hate seeing O'Shea Brissett out there for 2-3 minutes, give this team energy. He will defend at all costs. And at least he's somewhat of an offensive threat. Kornet is not an offensive threat unless he's right around the dunker spot. He's just not. He used to be a guy that shot threes. I mean, you look back at the beginning of his NBA career, Kornet would actually take and make some threes. He doesn't do that. I mean, he is literally just catch the basketball and deliver it to somebody else via handoff or swing. And so Indiana is not going to honor Luke Kornet's offense because his offense doesn't deserve to be honored, frankly. At least Brissett, Brissett can attack the bucket. He's not a good shooter, but at least he can try to drive and pick up some fouls, get this team in the bonus, right? So I keep looking at this, and I would love to see Mazzulla give it a shot. Brissett, small ball lineup. You can move Tatum to the 5. Tatum defended Evan Mobley in spots last series. He can defend Miles Turner in spots as well. So I wonder if Mazzulla will go small ball or if he's waiting to go to that, if he absolutely has to go to that, if this series gets a little bit more tight, right? If the Celtics lose tonight, if you go to Indiana and it's, 2-2, something like that. But I wouldn't mind seeing some of that small ball starting tonight. Again, I don't want Brissett out there for 15 minutes. Don't get it twisted. But I do think Brissett in a small ball lineup for, 5, 6, 7 minutes, not the worst idea in the world. He crashes the glass. He's very active. He brings his athleticism, his energy, and he, again, will defend. And he'll be able to switch much easier than Kornet does. Drop coverage versus the pick and roll. A lot of people talking about this. I don't think the Celtics will change much. Their number one priority is to slow down Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton shot 8 of 18 from the floor on Tuesday night. The Celtics will take that every game of this series. If Halliburton shoots 8 of 18 in this series every night, the Pacers lose in probably 5, if not swept. They need Halliburton to make more shots and to be more efficient. So I don't think the Celtics are going to change much defensively when you look at their approach with the drop coverage on the pick and roll. I think they're fine with how they defended a number of those threes. Halliburton hit 2 threes that were ridiculous, especially the end of the third quarter 3 when he literally double pumped, fell kind of forward into the side off of one leg, chucked it up off the glass, and it went in. You're not going to overreact to shots like that. I think the Celtics would be fine with, Halliburton shooting 8 of 18, having to take some of those tough threes that he had to take. He made another crazy 3 as well. Great contest. I mean, he made 3 very, very, very difficult threes in that game. So I think they're happy with how they defended Halliburton overall. And I know a lot of people look at it and say, oh, they're getting killed in the mid-range, right? Pascal Siakam and Nembhard killed you from like 15 to 18 feet. I think the Celtics look at Tuesday night, and they are willing to give up mid-range jump shots. I don't think Mazzulla has an issue with giving up some mid-range jump shots. They're trying to take away the 3 ball. And they'd also like to take away some of the points in the paint. You look at how they defended Cleveland. They allowed Evan Mobley to score in the paint because they weren't worried about that. They said, you can score all the 2s that you want, Evan. We're going to work on taking away the 3 because we know we're going to take a number of 3s and we know we can make a number of 3s. Again, it's the 3-point game. It's the math. And so I think Mazzulla is thrilled with a Nembhard 15-footer in the fourth quarter if his team is getting a good look from 3 on the other end. He will take that every single night of this series. I don't think the Celtics are shook by the Pacers hitting a bunch of mid-range jump shots. If they win the three-point line, they win this series. So I don't think they're going to overreact to what happened on Tuesday night. I just don't see it happening. Now, the turnovers, I also don't expect Indiana to turn the ball over, 22 times. They usually do a fantastic job of taking care of the basketball. So you have to be better defensively tonight than you were on Tuesday night, because you cannot expect Indiana to turn the ball over as much. The Celtics need to be disciplined. We talked about this before the series. Indiana forces you to be disciplined. You have to have incredible attention to detail. You have to have the energy and the effort constantly, over and over, possession to possession. And, I think the Celtics can be better defensively. I don't know if Indiana can do anything about Tatum or Brown. Tatum absolutely eviscerated them during the regular season. He was great on Tuesday night for the most part, aside from a couple of questionable shots in the fourth quarter. Big picture, he was awesome. And he's a walking 30-point game against the Pacers. So I don't know if they can do anything against Tatum other than overreact. And if they overreact, I think Tatum will make them pay with his playmaking, because now you're leaving somebody wide open. So I went into this series asking, how can Indiana defend Brown and Tatum? I continue to ask that question. I don't see anything easy. Aaron Nesmith, as I mentioned before the series began, Aaron Nesmith will annoy Brown and Tatum. He will have some good defensive possessions against them. But I still think with all of the switching off the pick and roll and stuff that the Celtics can do, I just don't know how the Pacers consistently limit the Celtics' best two players. I don't know how they can do it. I don't see it. And I'm actually optimistic about game 2. And I know it's dangerous. I might come back and say, boy, was I wrong. But I'm optimistic. I feel pretty good about tonight. I feel pretty good about tonight because I think the Celtics, again, defensively can be much better than they were. I think they will be better than they were on Tuesday night. I also look at Indiana. You remember the Bruins. The Bruins in that Florida series. What happened game 1? The Bruins had the emotional lift of beating Toronto in game 7 in overtime, right? And they went from that emotion in game 7 to Toronto. They walk into Florida game 1, and they were humming. And so I think, the Pacers, game 1 was that momentum game. We just beat the Knicks in back-to-back games. We just won at Madison Square Garden in game 7 when everybody thought the Knicks were going to win. They walked into Tuesday night with incredible confidence, and their bodies were going, right? Now, they just played an overtime game. They just lost that overtime game. They've played a hell of a lot more minutes than the Celtics have because the C's took care of business in the first 2 rounds, only having to play 10 games. So I would not be surprised if Indiana looks like the Bruins looked in game 2 against the Panthers and game 2 tonight against the Celtics. Now, of course, the Celtics have their own game 2 monkey on the back that they've got to grab and rip off. But I would not be surprised if Indiana kind of hits a lull tonight after the high emotion, high octane game in game 1 coming off of the 7-game series against the Knicks. I would not be surprised by that. I'm not guaranteeing it, but I would not be surprised by it. And I think the Celtics, they will be better adjusted against the Pacers style of play tonight than they were Tuesday. The Celtics came off of 2 series with teams that, they're just different. Miami and Cleveland, they're just different teams. They don't play with that kind of pace. They just, Indiana is nonstop all the time. And again, they force you to play discipline. They force the attention to detail. You can never let up. So I think it takes the C's a game to adjust. And I would hope that they come out tonight playing better defense because now they know what they've got to do. They're more used to that speed. They're more used to that nonstop ball movement, all of those things. I would hope and I would expect them to be better in transition And I would also expect them to be better for longer stretches in the half-court defensive sets. So I'm optimistic about tonight. I think the Celtics get that monkey off the back, the Game 2 monkey off the back, and I think they go into Game 3 on Saturday night in Indiana up 2-0. We'll see if I'm right. We'll see if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit it tomorrow. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, before I almost forgot, Artie79 threw a $5 super chat at us. Thank you, Artie. Artie is also a Patreon member. Love the Patreon members getting the exclusive content. Tomorrow they'll get an off-the-cuff podcast, which is a debut podcast, exclusive content. I talk about some national storylines. I talk about non-sports stuff, radio stuff, life stuff. That drops tomorrow. So I appreciate you, Artie. Thank you for the super chat. We're back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Until then, it's the Nick Cattle Show.